Hi and welcome. I'm Midnight Truth, and it's so nice to have you here tonight. Wherever you are right now, whether you're in bed, lie on the couch, or just looking for a quiet moment, I want you to know this time is for you. Take a deep breath in, and as you breathe out, feel the way the days start to fade. Let your mind settle. Let your body relax, and let yourself simply be. There's no rush, no pressure, just this calm, quiet moment, if you like. You can close your eyes and imagine yourself in a peaceful place. Maybe it's a cozy room with soft, warm lighting. Or maybe it's under a starry sky, with a gentle breeze brushing against you. Wherever you feel safe and calm, let yourself drift there. I know many of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before we begin, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time is it there? Tonight's story is gentle and soothing, perfect to carry you into a deep, restful sleep. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's begin. I moved into the house on a Monday morning. The sun was out, the air was crisp, and the movers were late. The house stood quietly at the end of a dead-end street in a sleepy suburban neighborhood. The kind where people waved at each other but didn't ask questions. It was older than most of the homes around it, with flaking white paint, a sagging porch, and a tall sycamore tree that leaned just a little too close to the roof. I had signed the papers 2 weeks earlier, right after my divorce finalized. The timing felt too perfect to question. The price was suspiciously low, yes, but I needed a new start, a place to be alone. And for someone like me, freshly single with no children, an old two-bedroom home was more than enough. It was mine. The real estate agent called it a fixer-upper with personality. I prefer to think of it as quiet, peaceful, empty. But even as I stood there on the lawn with the key in my hand, something felt off. Not bad, just strange. Like I was walking into someone else's dream. The inside smelled faintly of mothballs and something sharper underneath, like burnt wood or old garlic. The floorboards creaked in odd places. When you walked down the hall, it groaned beneath your feet a second too late, as if echoing you rather than supporting you. I told myself it was the wood settling, just old bones stretching. I spent most of that first day cleaning. The previous owner hadn't bothered. Dust coated everything. A thin layer of grime clung to the corners of the windows. There was an old, rusted radiator in the living room that made a ticking sound, even when it wasn't on. I remember pausing in the hallway around sunset. The light through the upstairs window cast long, gold streaks across the floor. I could hear birds outside, someone mowing a lawn, a dog barking. The house, for all its age, stood quietly. It wasn't until night fell that I heard the first sound. It was a heavy thump, not loud, just low enough to feel rather than hear. I had been lying on the couch, half asleep, when it came from upstairs. One thump, then silence. I froze. My heart jumped just for a second, but then I smiled. Old houses make noise. The wood expands and contracts. The plumbing taps against the walls. It's nothing. I told myself that again and again, but I didn't go upstairs. The next morning, I met the neighbor. Her name was Mrs. Nolan. Late 60s cardigan, cat hair on her sleeves. She was out trimming her rose bushes when I walked out to check the mailbox. "You're the one who bought the Granger house," she said without turning her head. I nodded. "I guess that's what it's called?" Her clippers stopped mid-snip. She looked at me with narrowed eyes. People don't stay long in that one. I laughed a little, trying to make it light. "Well, I'm hoping to change that. Last girl who lived there moved out in the middle of the night," she said flatly. "Left all her things. Said she saw something on the stairs that didn't belong to her." I stared. "You're kidding." Mrs. Nolan shrugged. "I don't joke about that house. My husband said it was cursed. Me, I think it's just bad luck." I tried to smile, but something cold settled in my stomach. She watched me a moment longer, then turned back to her flowers. "You'll see, if you stay long enough." That night, I left the hallway light on. I lay in bed listening to every tick, creak, and moan of the house. It was like it breathed. The ceiling fan clicked softly above me. The wind rustled the sycamore tree outside the window. And then, sometime after midnight, I heard footsteps. Slow, steady, heavy. They started at the far end of the upstairs hallway, just outside my bedroom. They moved toward the door. I sat up. The footsteps stopped. I waited, holding my breath, my ears strained for any sound. Nothing. I told myself it was a dream. I must have been dreaming. But when I got up the next morning and walked to the hallway, the floorboards were cold, much colder than the rest of the house, and I could swear I saw the faintest outline of footprints, bare feet, pressed into the dust on the wooden floor. I didn't clean them up. I just stared at them. I told myself it didn't mean anything. People leave marks and dust all the time, but I hadn't walked barefoot in the hallway, not once. The next few nights passed with similar sounds. A whisper of movement here, a knock there, sometimes the radiator hissed, like someone whispering behind the wall. Sometimes I felt a cold spot move through the room, like walking through fog. I didn't talk to Mrs. Nolan again. I avoided her gaze through the window. On the sixth night, I woke up at 3:13 a.m. The digital clock glowed red beside me. Something was sitting on the edge of the bed. I couldn't move. I didn't hear it sit. I didn't feel it climb onto the mattress. But I knew it was there. The weight of it bent the mattress ever so slightly. I felt the pressure shift behind my knees. I lay still, not breathing. Seconds passed. Then the pressure lifted, and the sound of retreating footsteps crossed the room. They stopped at the door. And then nothing. I turned the light on. The room was empty. That was the night I decided to find out who lived here before me. 2 days later, I found the journal. It was wedged behind a false panel in the upstairs linen closet. The wood popped loose when I leaned on it. Inside was a space no bigger than a shoebox, and the journal sat there like it had been waiting. The name inside the cover read, Malcolm Granger. I flipped to the first page and read, asterisk, the door is open. I've done something terrible, asterisk. I spent the whole night reading that journal. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, like the person writing it had all the time in the world. But the words twisted something in my gut. Each line felt like a confession, whispered in a room that should have stayed silent. Malcolm Granger had lived in the house over 60 years ago. He was the original owner, according to the journal. He had been professor of theology and folklore at a nearby college. But outside the classroom, he was obsessed with something darker. Ancient religions, summoning rites, doorways between our world and something else. His entries started normal. Observations, academic thoughts, theories about belief systems and symbols. But over time, the entries shifted. He started writing about dreams. The same one, again and again. A door in a basement that didn't exist. A door that only opened in his sleep. Behind it, whispers. Sometimes a hand reaching through, black as ash, dragging something invisible across the floor. He wrote about the rituals. At first, it sounded like research. Then it became personal. He described performing them in the attic. Chalk symbols, candles, Latin prayers, offerings, always at night, always alone. He believed he had made contact with something, not a spirit, not a demon. He didn't call it by name, just it watches through cracks. It walks when the house is still. It never leaves. The last few pages were frantic, sloppy. Some lines were scratched out so hard they tore the paper. It came into my room last night. Asterisk, I didn't invite it. I didn't say the words. But the door must have stayed open. Asterisk. Asterisk, I hear in the walls now. It wants out. Asterisk. Asterisk, it doesn't care if I die. It just wants someone else to open the door again. Asterisk. The final entry was just one line. If you're reading this, leave now. I closed the journal and just sat there in the closet. The air felt thick, the silence pressing on me from every direction. Something creaked behind the wall. I scrambled out of the closet and slammed the door shut. My heart was racing. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I tried to be normal. I went for a walk, got coffee from the diner down the street, smiled at strangers like everything was fine. But the house stayed in my head like a splinter. When I came back home, I stood outside for a long time before going in. I noticed something then. The front door, which I had locked that morning, was slightly ajar. Not open, but not closed either. Just hanging. I checked every window, every room. Nothing was missing. Nothing was out of place. Except one thing. In the upstairs hallway, someone had written something on the wall with a fingertip in the dust. One word. Open. I cleaned it off without thinking. Scrubbed the wall so hard my knuckles bled. But even as I wiped away, I felt like I was erasing a warning. That night, the footsteps came back. Louder. Closer. I had started sleeping with the bedroom door locked, but I still heard it. Those slow, deliberate steps in the hallway, back and forth. Sometimes stopping right outside the door, just standing there. And once, the doorknob turned. Just once. A slow, rattling twist. Then stillness. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I waited until the sun came up before I finally opened the door. There was nothing there. Just the hallway. Silent. Empty. But the journal started to haunt me in ways I didn't expect. Certain lines would repeat in my head during the day. I'd be doing the dishes, and I'd hear Malcolm's voice, at least how I imagined it, saying, "It never leaves." I went to the local records office that afternoon, searching for any information on Malcolm Granger. There wasn't much. No death certificate. No forwarding address. He just disappeared. The clerk told me that after Granger vanished, the house sat empty for years. Then it changed hands. Again and again. Nobody stayed longer than a year. One of them, a woman named Julia Bishop, had reportedly run out of the house screaming in the middle of the night. Neighbors said she refused to even step onto porch afterward. She moved across the country. Never came back. They said she kept saying the same phrase over and over again. Asterisk, something sits on my bed. It waits for me to wake up. Asterisk. I asked the clerk if anyone ever reported seeing anything inside the house. He hesitated, then leaned in and whispered, "There's a file, but it's unofficial. Police didn't keep it." He showed me a photocopy of a handwritten report. It was old, faded. The report said a child had gone missing in the neighborhood decades ago. His name was Danny. Last seen playing in front of the Granger house. No one ever found him, but there was a note written in pencil on the bottom of the page. A neighbor had reported seeing a tall, dark shape standing in the upstairs window that night. A shape that didn't look human. I went home with that paper in my bag, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, I locked all the doors. I left every light on. I sat in the living room with the TV on low, just for noise. And around 2 a.m., the air changed. The temperature dropped. I could see my breath. And then from upstairs, I heard a voice. It was soft, childlike, whispering my name. Over and over. Asterisk Daniel. Daniel, asterisk. I didn't move. I couldn't. The voice moved closer. I could hear it at the top of the stairs. "Daniel, come upstairs. It's open now." Something stepped on the stairs. The creak of each wooden board echoed through the house. I wanted to scream, to run, but I sat frozen. The journal lay open on the coffee table in front of me, and I stared at the last line again. "If you're reading this, leave now." But I didn't leave. I needed to know what Malcolm had done, what he opened, and deep down I knew, whatever it was, it hadn't left. It was still here, waiting. The next morning, I told myself I'd imagined it. That voice, the sound on the stairs, the cold air. Maybe it was stress, sleep deprivation, too much coffee, and not enough sense. But something had shifted inside the house. I could feel it. The air carried a weight now. It followed me from room to room, heavy on the back of my neck, like someone watching too closely. I'd glance over my shoulder and find nothing, but that didn't mean no one was there. I stopped using the upstairs bathroom. The mirror started fogging up on its own, even when there was no shower running. Once, when I wiped it clean, I thought I saw something standing behind me. Just for a second, a dark figure near the doorway. But when I spun around, nothing. I started sleeping on the couch downstairs. Not that I slept much. Every night was the same now. The footsteps, the creaking upstairs, the faint whisper of my name, sometimes soft, sometimes hoarse and angry, sometimes more than one voice. And the dreams, God, the dreams. I'd find myself in the basement. A door would appear, an old wooden one with rusted iron hinges. It didn't belong there, but I could never stop myself from walking toward it. The closer I got, the louder I'd hear whispers leaking from behind it, like a crowd pressed against the wood, murmuring and begging. Let us out. Let us in. Say the words. I'd wake up sweating, sometimes screaming. Every time I opened my eyes, I was sure I'd see that door at the foot of the stairs. One afternoon, I knocked on my neighbor's door. The woman who had first warned me, Marcy. She opened the door slowly, eyes wary. You still staying there? She asked, not even greeting me. I nodded. I need to ask you something, I said, about Malcolm Granger, about the house. She stared at me for a long time, then sighed. Come in, but not for long. Her house smelled like cinnamon and dust. Old blankets lined the furniture. A cat sat perched on a window ledge, staring directly at me. I didn't want to say too much at first, Marcy began. Didn't want to scare you off, but since you're asking. She sat across from me and folded her hands in her lap. There have always been stories about that place. My mom told me when I was little, never look into the attic windows after dark, that if you saw someone staring out, it wasn't someone living. I didn't interrupt. I didn't blink. Malcolm was strange, kept to himself. People said he was quiet but polite, but near the end he stopped coming outside. They'd hear him chanting sometimes. See candles burning through the attic window. She leaned in slightly. Then one night, there was this loud noise, a scream. Neighbors went to check on him, but he was gone. No one ever saw him again. Police searched the house, found symbols drawn on the attic floor, burned things, animal bones. They said it was just eccentric nonsense, but people knew better. She stood and crossed the room to an old cabinet. From inside, she pulled out a yellowed envelope. My mother kept this, she said, handing it to me. Said it was a photo someone took before Malcolm vanished. I opened it carefully. The picture was dark and grainy, clearly taken at night. It showed the house, my house, from the street. But in the attic window, there was something, not a person, not exactly. It looked like a figure, tall and narrow, but stretched in ways that didn't look human. The arms too long, the neck too crooked, and its face, if you could call it that, was just an empty white blur. They said it stood there every night for a week before Malcolm disappeared, she said quietly. And then it was gone, until now. I took the photo home with me. That night, I covered the attic windows with blankets and nailed them shut. But at 3:07 a.m., I woke up to the sound of the nails popping. One by one, asterisk tap, 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 asterisk. The blankets peeled back slowly, like fingers were lifting them from the other side. I didn't look. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, asterisk is not real. It's not real, asterisk. But deep down, I knew it was. The next morning, I made a decision. I had to go into the attic. The journal said Malcolm performed the rituals there. Whatever he opened, whatever he invited, it started up there. Maybe that's where I could find something. Close it, seal it, or at least understand what I was facing. I waited until daylight. The attic door was stiff. I had to shove it upward, with groaning against years of disuse. Dust poured down like ash. I climbed the narrow steps, flashlight in hand. The beam caught cobwebs, old trunks, stacks of moldy newspapers. But in the center of the floor, something was drawn into the wood. A circle. It was old, carved deep into the boards. Inside it, strange symbols, letters I didn't recognize. Black wax had dried into the grooves. Burn marks stretched out from the center, like something had exploded outward. As I stepped closer, the air grew thick. A static buzz filled my ears. The flashlight flickered, and then I heard it. A voice, clear close, as if right beside me. Asterisk, say the words. Just say the words. Let us speak. Asterisk. I spun around. No one was there. but the circle, something was shifting inside it. The wood looked wet now, like it was sweating. The symbol shimmered, pulsing with some inner light. I backed away, and then I saw the journal. It was sitting in the far corner, open to a page I hadn't reached before. At the top, in large letters, Malcolm had written, "The final ritual. Do not complete. Asterisk, asterisk." Below that were instructions. A chant, a phrase, directions for opening a door that cannot be closed once seen. I slammed the book shut, but behind me, the floor creaked. I turned and saw footprints. Wet, bare, leading across the attic toward the wall. And then the sound, a low animal breathing. Something was in the attic with me. I ran, half fell down the ladder, slammed the attic door shut, and pushed a chair underneath it. I could still hear the breathing. Deep, steady, like something pacing just above my head. I didn't sleep. In fact, I didn't move from the couch until the sun rose. The journal sat on the table in front of me, closed, but I could feel it pulsing, like it wanted to be read again. I didn't go to work the next day. I didn't eat much either. I sat on the couch, staring at the journal, afraid to touch it, afraid not to. The memory of that attic breathing, that slow, almost human rhythm, wouldn't leave my head. I kept glancing up at the ceiling like something might punch through it. The attic door creaked once around noon. I stayed frozen for hours. Eventually, I forced myself to move. I needed answers, not just from the journal, from someone who knew more than whispered stories and creepy photos. Someone who could tell me what the hell was happening in that house. I called Marcy again. She didn't pick up, so I drove to the county records office. If Malcolm Granger had lived in the house for years, there had to be something about him. Deeds, death certificates, maybe even police reports. The clerk on duty was a heavy-set man with sleepy eyes and an air of practiced indifference. I gave him the address and asked for anything he had. He disappeared into a back room. 20 minutes later, he returned with a folder, thin, yellowed, and brittle at the edges. "Not much," he said, "but here's what we've got." I took it to one of the long tables and opened it carefully. There were 3 documents inside. The first was a property deed dated in 1962. Malcolm Granger had bought the house outright from the original owner, a man named Amos Langley. No mortgage, paid in full. The second was a police report, dated in 1979. A neighbor had filed a complaint. Loud noises at night, screams, and what she called chanting in another language. The responding officer had written that the resident, Mr. Granger, was uncooperative, evasive, and visibly unstable. He claimed he was performing spiritual work and communicating across the veil. The final document made my hands go cold. It was a missing person report, filed by a distant cousin in 1980. Malcolm Granger had stopped responding to letters and phone calls. No one had seen him in months. The cousin lived in Arizona and hadn't been close, but he'd inherited the house on paper when Granger was declared legally dead. The file ended there. No body, no sightings, just gone. I sat back in the chair and stared at the thin stack of paper. Granger hadn't just disappeared. He'd opened something, and whatever it was, it hadn't left. That night, I tried sleeping again. I took 2 sleeping pills and curled up on the couch, bundled under 3 blankets. Around 2 a.m., I felt a shift. The house changed temperature, dropped fast. I could see my breath. The television turned on by itself, just static. I reached for the remote, but it wouldn't respond. I had to pull the plug from the wall. And when I turned back toward the hallway, I froze. There was something standing at the foot of the stairs. It wasn't clear, more like a shadow that had pulled itself loose from the wall. Tall, slender, its head crooked slightly, like it was watching me from inside itself. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. The thing began to step forward, slow, deliberate. I backed into the wall, heart pounding, throat too tight to scream. Then the thing vanished. Not like it walked away, not like it faded. It simply blinked out, as if it was never there. I slid to the floor and sat there until sunrise. That morning, I opened the journal again. I needed to know what it wanted. I needed to find something I could use against it. I flipped past pages of symbols and chants and drawings. Circles with eyes, doors with hands, things that made my stomach turn. Then I found a page titled, The Marked Room. Under was a rough sketch of a room. The attic, in the drawing. There was a specific section of floorboards near the northern wall, just under the circular symbol. Malcolm had written, asterisk they come through here. Beneath this spot is the original wood, never replaced, never sealed. It's the point of opening. The threshold. If I seal it, maybe they'll go back. Asterisk. But the next entry was a smear of ink, as if Malcolm had spilled something while writing. Beneath the smear, a single sentence. They won't let me seal it. I stared at that line for a long time. If there was a way to close the threshold, maybe I could finally stop this. But I wasn't Malcolm. I didn't know the rituals. I didn't know what I was dealing with. I did know one thing, though. I had to go back into the attic. Before nightfall, I gathered everything I thought I'd need: salt, candles, nails, a hammer. Even a cheap Bible I found in a drawer I hadn't opened since I moved in. I waited until the sun was directly overhead. Then I pulled down the attic ladder and climbed slowly. The air was worse this time. It wasn't just cold, it was thick, like it was pushing back against me. The second my head cleared the floor, I smelled something foul. Rot, decay, and something else, like burned paper and copper. The circle in the center of the attic looked darker than before, almost alive. The symbols around it glistened, as if they'd been freshly drawn. I found the spot from the sketch, the northern wall. 5 feet in, I knelt down and touched the floor. It was soft, damp, not like the rest of the boards. I pried at it with the hammer. It lifted with a groan, revealing a small hollow beneath, and inside, a bundle wrapped in old yellow cloth, stained dark red in places. I hesitated, then slowly pulled the cloth aside. Inside was a doll, but not a normal one. It was made of stitched animal skin. Its eyes were buttons, one black, one missing. Its mouth was sewn shut with thick gray thread, and in the place where its heart should have been was a human tooth. I dropped it and scrambled back. The attic shifted. The air began to hum, low, vibrating, like a generator winding up. Whispers erupted from every corner. You found it. You see now. Asterisk, say the words. Open the door. Asterisk. The circle began to glow faintly, light bleeding out between the cracks. The doll started to twitch. I ran. I slammed the attic door shut behind me, shoved the chair under it again, and locked myself in the bathroom. I stayed there until dark. That night, the doll was on my kitchen table. I never brought it down. Its sewn mouth had come undone, and beside it, written in ash on the table, was a phrase. The door waits. I didn't sleep that night. The doll stayed on the kitchen table, unmoving but heavy with presence. Every time I passed by it, I felt like it was watching me, not with eyes, but with some quiet hunger. Its open mouth gaped like it wanted to speak, or scream. I kept thinking about what I saw in the attic, that hollow space, the whispers, the glowing circle, and the journal's line. They won't let me seal it. I was in something I didn't understand, and worse, something I couldn't seem to escape. That morning, I opened the journal again and forced myself to read on. Malcolm's handwriting had grown messier. The pages became more frantic. He wrote of night visitations, dark figures standing by a bed, brushing his skin with fingers like ice, of hearing his name whispered from inside walls, of waking up with scratches across his back. He described dreams that weren't dreams, dreams where he was walking through endless hallways that twisted on themselves, with doors that pulsed like breathing skin. Behind each door, a voice. Some begged, some screamed, one just laughed. But the worst part, the part that made my stomach clench, was the page where he said, asterisk if you've seen the doll, it already knows you. You're marked. You cannot leave until the door takes what it wants. Asterisk. I slammed the journal shut. I had to get out. I threw a few things in a backpack, grabbed my keys, and went for the door. It wouldn't open. Not stuck. Locked. From the inside. I checked all the windows. Same thing. The locks twisted, jammed. Not one would open. The bathroom window, the one that always stuck, now wouldn't even budge a quarter inch. It was like the house didn't want me to leave. Like it was holding me. I picked up my phone to call someone. Anyone, but the screen was black. Dead. Even though it was fully charged the night before. Panic clawed at me. I dropped the phone and backed into the wall. Chest tight, breath short. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Not from above. From beneath the floorboards. Slow, deliberate, heavy. Crossing the living room, heading toward the stairs. I stood still, holding my breath. The steps stopped at the base of the stairs. Then one by one, creaked upward. The door to the hallway began to rattle softly. Not like something was knocking, like it was vibrating from a low sound behind it. I ran into the kitchen and slammed the door behind me. Silence. Then a thump. Then another, as if something was throwing its body against the other side. I braced the door with a chair and crouched in the corner, eyes wide, ears straining. A single word pressed itself into my mind, unspoken but clear. Open. I didn't. I stayed like that until the thump stopped. Until the house went still again. When I dared to come out, the hallway door was open, but nothing was there. Only a smell, faint metallic, like old blood. I cleaned up the mess, barely keeping it together, and then sat in front of the doll. Its button eye seemed brighter, like it had absorbed something. I picked it up, hand shaking, and flipped it over. There was a small piece of paper stitched into its back. I tore it free and unrolled it. On it was a name I didn't recognize. Eloise Maddox. I turned to the journal again, flipping through for the name. Halfway through the book, in a list of names, I found it. Malcolm had been writing down people. People who had come into the house. Visitors. Tenants. Repairmen. One-time guests. Most names were crossed out, except a few, including Eloise Maddox. And mine, scrawled at the bottom, fresh and darker than the rest. Daniel Price. Me. I grabbed the list and ran to the computer in the study. The house still had internet, though it lagged worse than usual. I typed Eloise Maddox disappearance into the search bar. A hit came up immediately. She had gone missing in 1991, last seen at a party. Her car was found 2 blocks from this very address. Keys in the ignition. Driver's door open. No one had ever found her. Her last known contact? Malcolm Granger, reclusive neighbor. The article included a photo. The same face I had seen in the photograph Marcy showed me. The woman with the strained smile and the hollow eyes. My head swam. I didn't just move into a haunted house. I had moved into a trap, a place with a history of feeding. The door wasn't metaphor. Something in this house opened the door, and something else came through it. And now it wanted me. I turned back to the journal, flipping to the final pages. Malcolm's writing had turned chaotic. Rush loops, ink stains, scratched out sentences. But one part stood out clearer than the rest. Asterisk, a ritual must be completed. Without it, the door stays hungry. The house chooses. If the ritual begins but is not finished, the hunger turns on the summoner. Asterisk. Then, in bold letters, I tried to control it. I failed. It feeds on fear, on memory, on guilt. Asterisk, asterisk. Underneath that, the doll is the key. Burn it and the house fights back. Use it and the door opens. Choose wisely. Asterisk, asterisk. My blood ran cold. There were no good choices left. Either open the door and give it something, or fight it and risk being torn apart. I held the doll in both hands, its stitched skin rough and warm. I didn't want to open anything, but I didn't want to stay here and wait to be devoured. The only way forward was through the attic, through the threshold, and through whatever Malcolm had left behind. That night, the house felt alive. The floor pulsed faintly beneath my feet, like a heartbeat. The walls creaked not from age, but from pressure, as if something inside them strained to push through. The air had changed, heavier, wetter, thick with an unseen presence. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just sat there in the dim light of the study. The journal open beside me, the doll in my lap like some cursed artifact I didn't dare release. The attic was waiting. I knew that much. Around midnight, I stood up, walked the base of stairs, and stared upward. The pull was magnetic, not physical, but deep, somehow emotional, even spiritual. It didn't feel like something dragging me. It felt like something calling me. I climbed the stairs slowly. Each step creaked louder than it should have, as if amplifying my hesitation. I reached the top, hand trembling as I touched the attic door. It was already unlocked. I pulled it open, and a wave of ice-cold air swept down over me. Not a breeze, a surge, like the attic exhaled. The light was dim. The bulb overhead flickered and buzzed. The chalk circle was still there, but changed, thicker, smeared, almost pulsing, and in the center, a black stain like dried blood. I stepped forward. The journal had mentioned a ritual. Malcolm's words haunted me. Asterisk, use the doll and the door opens. Choose wisely. Asterisk, I didn't know how to perform a ritual, but part of me believed the house would teach me. Or worse, it would guide my hands. I laid the doll at the center of the circle. Immediately, the bulb above me popped, shattering glass across the floor. Darkness swallowed the attic, but the circle began to glow, a dull red, like dying embers. The same pulsing, the same rhythm as before. I crouched outside the circle, unsure what to do. And then the whispers started again. Low, layered, impossible to understand but full of hunger. They circled me, came from the corners of the attic, from beneath the floorboards, from inside my own head. A voice, different from the rest, cut through them all. Not a whisper, a breathy, strained croak. Daniel, I froze. That voice, it wasn't in my head. It was in the room. I spun around and saw it. No, her. A figure, half-shadowed, standing near the old trunk by the wall. Tall, pale, hair stringy and dark with damp. Face distorted, but not unrecognizable. It was her, Eloise Maddox, or what was left of her. She didn't move, just stood there, lips twitching, eyes hollow. I stayed too long, she whispered. I wouldn't give it what it wanted. I tried to step toward her, but she shook her head. You're part of it now. The moment you stepped inside. It watches. It waits. She looked down at the doll in the circle. That's the offering, she rasped. Not to burn. To awaken. I didn't understand. What does it want? I asked. Her mouth twitched again. Not quite a smile. To remember. She took a step forward and vanished. Just blinked out like smoke caught in wind. And the doll began to twitch. The threads, it seems, pulled tight. Its limbs jerked like a marionette. Its button eye rolled loosely in its head as if trying to see me. Then it sat up. No strings. No hands. Just movement. Intentional. Aware. It turned its head toward me and spoke. A garbled, wet whisper. Not a voice from the mouth, but from everywhere at once. Daniel, my knees gave out. I stumbled backward into a stack of boxes, heart racing. The doll stood slowly and pointed a tiny stitched arm toward the far corner of the attic. The wall there looked normal at first, but then I saw it, a faint outline, like a door not fully closed, a hidden panel. I don't know why I listened, why I moved toward it, but my body obeyed, trembling, soaked in sweat. I touched the wall. The outline became clearer. The wood groaned, and a seam cracked open. Behind it, a space, no bigger than a closet. Inside, a mirror, tall, old, framed in black with carved with symbols that made my stomach twist just looking at them. But the mirror didn't reflect the attic. It showed a different room. Stone walls, candles, a circle like the one beneath me, glowing with a deeper, redder light, and someone standing in the center. Not Malcolm. Me. I stumbled back, slamming the panel shut. The doll collapsed, motionless again. I didn't understand it, but I knew the house was showing me something, preparing me, or testing me. Downstairs, something crashed. I bolted out of the attic and raced to the first floor. The kitchen light was swinging, flickering wildly. All the cabinets were open. The doll was now on the kitchen counter. I had left it upstairs. I backed away slowly. A sound broke the silence. Laughter. From outside, I rushed to the window. In the middle of the street, a figure stood staring at the house. A man, tall and unmoving, dressed in black. I couldn't see his face, but the moment I looked at him, he turned and walked away. I stood there, frozen. Then a knock came from the front door. 3 slow taps. I didn't answer it. I couldn't. Whatever this was, it wasn't human. I spent the rest of the night in the corner of the living room, journal in my lap, the house silent again. But silence, I had learned, was just a breath between storms. The next chapter of this nightmare was coming, and I wasn't sure if I'd survive it. The next morning didn't feel like morning. There was sunlight, but it seemed faint, muted, like it filtered through something old and dusty before reaching my windows. Every shadow in the house seemed longer than it should have been. Every sound too sharp. I was sleep-deprived, shaken, but not dreaming. The doll was still in the kitchen, sitting exactly where I last saw it, on the counter, facing the hallway like a watchman. I didn't touch it. Instead, I walked into the bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked hollow, like someone who had walked out of a funeral and never quite returned to the living. There were dark circles under my eyes and a rawness in my expression I didn't recognize. I made coffee with hands that trembled, barely able to hold the mug. I sat at the table and opened the journal again, flipping through the pages, looking for anything I might have missed, and I found something. A page stuck to another near the end. A half-ripped note, scribbled sideways in frantic, uneven handwriting. Asterisk, the mirror is not a window, it's a mouth. What it shows is not where you're going, but what it wants you to become. Asterisk, beneath that, 2 words in red ink. Asterisk, don't stare. Asterisk, I thought of the attic mirror, the image of me in that circle. I slammed the journal shut. The knock at the door made me jump. Not the slow, deliberate knock from last night. This one was frantic, repeated. I hesitated, then opened it. It was Ms. Ellis, my neighbor from next door. She looked disheveled, panicked. Hair in a messy bun and eyes wide behind her glasses. I need to talk to you, she said, pushing her way inside without waiting for an invitation. I closed the door behind her, startled. What's going on? She stood in the living room, glancing at the hallway, the kitchen, the stairs, as if expecting something to leap out from the shadows. That house, she said, her voice low. I've lived next door for 16 years. You know how many people have come and gone since then. I stayed quiet. 10, she continued. 10 renters. 2 owners. Every one of them either moved out early, left town completely, or worse. Worse. She nodded, lips trembling. There was a woman in the 90s. Stayed about 6 months. Then one night she ran out barefoot, screaming about something watching her from the attic. They found her 2 days later, wandering the woods outside town. Couldn't speak. She just hummed and scratched her arms until they bled. I swallowed hard. Another breath. There was a family before you, the Salazars. Heard the little girl talking to someone in her room. Thought it was imaginary friends. Then she started drawing things. Black circles, red symbols, mirrors. She stopped speaking. 2. The parents left in the middle of the night. Never even collected their deposit. I felt cold sweat gathering along my spine. Ms. Ellis looked me dead in the eye. You need to leave. I opened my mouth to reply, but she raised a hand. You don't understand. That place is not haunted. It's hungry. It plays with you, confuses time, warps your sense of self. It doesn't just want to scare you. It wants to change you. Silence lingered between us. I asked, then why are you still living next to it? She blinked, then whispered, because someone has to watch the door. Before I could ask her what she meant, she left. Quick steps down the porch and across the lawn, never once turning around. That afternoon, I tried to leave the house. I packed a small bag, grabbed my keys. But when I stepped outside, the sunlight felt wrong again, like stage lighting. The air was too still. No birds. No wind. I got into my car, put the key in the ignition, turned it. Nothing. No engine noise. No click. Dead. I tried again. Still nothing. I looked up and saw my reflection in the rear view mirror, except it didn't move when I did. It stared back at me, unblinking, mouth slightly open. Then it smiled, and the mirror cracked. I bolted out of the car, heart pounding, breath coming in short, ragged bursts. Back in the house, I locked the door, all sense of escape forgotten. That night, it started again. The attic door creaked open on its own. Heavy footsteps above me, slow, deliberate. I didn't go up there. I stayed in the living room with every light on. At 3:12 a.m. exactly, the lights flickered and died. I lit a candle, sat still. Then came the sound of breathing. Close, in the room with me, but no one there. The candle flame fluttered. My breath caught, a whisper from the shadows. "You're almost ready?" I turned slowly, eyes wide, but saw nothing. I wanted to scream, run, burn the house down. But I stayed, because part of me wasn't sure I could leave anymore. Not really. The house wasn't just a place I lived in. It had seeped into me, like smoke in the lungs, like water in the walls. I wasn't just living in it. It was living in me. The next day, I didn't wake up. I came to. I was on the floor of the living room, lying on my side. The candle from a night before had burned down to a puddle of wax, long gone cold. My mouth tasted of metal, and the inside of my head felt like it had been scrubbed raw. I tried to piece the night together. The whisper, the footsteps, the attic door creaking open on its own, the mirror, but it was all jumbled, like a bad dream that clings to your skin even after you open your eyes. The clock on the wall blinked midnight. I picked up my phone. 3:12 p.m. Again with the numbers. Again with the time. I got up, grabbed the journal, and flipped through the pages. There had to be something, some explanation, some key I'd missed. I needed to know what it wanted, why it wouldn't let me go. The pages felt hot in my hands. My fingers trembled. Then I found it, buried toward the back of the journal, barely legible under faded ink and smudges. A phrase I hadn't noticed before. Asterisk. It doesn't want to be seen. It wants to be believed. Asterisk. Beneath that, a passage. Asterisk. The house chooses its keeper. It cannot survive without attention, belief, fear. You give it purpose by staying. You feed it by noticing. It drinks from your doubt and grows from your fear. Asterisk. My stomach turned. I was feeding it. Every time I flinched at the creaks, stared too long at the mirror, followed the sound of footsteps. It was feeding. It was learning me, and I was learning it. 2. Something shifted that afternoon. The temperature in the house changed, not just colder, but wet. Like the air itself had turned to condensation, like I was breathing through a sponge. My walls were sweating. Tiny beads of moisture rolled down the hallway wallpaper, leaving behind streaks that looked like writing. But when I leaned in to look closer, the letters faded, vanished. I started to hear something behind the walls, like someone whisper my name, very softly, over and over again. I pressed my ear to the plaster and heard a giggle, childlike, sharp. I backed away. There were more messages in the journal, some in different handwriting, as if the previous tenants had all written their pieces before giving up or going mad. One passage stood out. Asterisk. If you start seeing yourself in other rooms, you've gone too far. Asterisk. That night, I set up cameras in the hallway and living room, old ones I had from a home security kit. I didn't even check if they worked. I just needed something to see what I couldn't. I made tea, or thought I did, and sat on the edge of my bed, watching the hallway. Hours passed. I dozed off, woke to the sound of glass shattering downstairs. I ran down, heart pounding, and found the mirror in the front hall cracked from top to bottom. Long, jagged lines that seemed to form a web. In the center of the web, my reflection, except it wasn't me. The figure was taller, thinner. Its smile was wrong. Its eyes were sunken, like they'd been scooped out and replaced with shadows. Then the smile moved, even though my face hadn't. The reflection raised a hand. I didn't. I backed away. It didn't. It just stood there, watching, smiling, breathing. The journal slipped from my hand and hit the floor. Pages fluttered open to one I hadn't seen. A list, names, all of them crossed out, except the last one, Alex Parker, my name, and beneath it, freshly written in ink that looked wet, asterisk, you're next, asterisk. I stared, frozen. Then the front door opened by itself, just a crack, enough to make the wind whisper through. But there was no wind, only breathing, slow, shallow, right behind me. I turned, nothing, yet the feeling that something had just stepped out of the mirror and into my home clung to the air. The walls pulsed. The floor groaned under weight that didn't belong to me. I ran upstairs, locked the bedroom door, sat in the corner with a baseball bat, and waited. The house was alive now, fully, no longer pretending to be old or creaky or misunderstood. It had dropped the act, and I couldn't stop it, because part of me, deep down, had started to believe. Worse, I'd begun to wonder if I'd always been here. If the life before this was just another layer the house had stripped away. When I finally looked in the bathroom mirror the next morning, my reflection wasn't laid in mimicking me. It moved in sync. But the eyes? They weren't mine anymore. They were watching me, waiting, smiling. The following morning, I packed a bag. Not out of panic this time, but determination. I told myself it was just for a night or two, just a break, clear my head, let the house cool down. But deep down, I knew I was running. I didn't have a plan. I just knew I couldn't stay another night. I tossed clothes into a duffel, grabbed the journal, and reached for my phone to call a nearby hotel. No signal. I walked to the front door. It wouldn't open. The knob turned, but the door didn't budge, as if the wood had swollen in the frame. I threw my shoulder into it. Nothing. It was like pushing against concrete. The windows wouldn't open either. The air inside the house turned heavier with every breath. My lungs started to feel thick, like I was inhaling syrup instead of air. And then I heard it, the scratching, from inside the walls, from every direction at once. Fingers, claws, something dragging itself along the beams, burrowing, crawling. I stepped back from the living room window and noticed something written in the fog on the glass. It wasn't there a moment ago. It said, asterisk stay, asterisk. My heart stopped. I turned and sprinted upstairs, grabbing my phone, trying to call anyone. The screen stayed black. Wouldn't even turn on. Back in the hallway, the light bulbs began to flicker, then pop. One by one, they exploded, plunging the house into darkness. I could hear the bulbs cracking like dry twigs in the distance, a domino line of destruction. That's when I saw him, in the mirror at the end of the hallway, standing perfectly still. Not a shadow, not a blur. A man, gaunt, his face stretched like melted wax, eyes hollow, wearing an old, torn suit. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at me. I ran to the mirror. He was gone, but the hallway behind me, it looked different in the reflection. Longer, tilted, wrong. There were doors in the mirror that didn't exist in the house. One of them opened, just a crack, and a face peered out, smiling, but not kindly. It was the same face from my dream, the one whispering from the attic. I turned to run back to my bedroom, but the floor groaned and tilted beneath me. I fell hard, my arms slamming into the stair railing as I tumbled down. I hit the floor, hard. Everything went black for a second. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the living room carpet, the smell of burning wax choking the air again. The journal was beside me, open to a new page. I swear I hadn't written it, but it was my handwriting. Asterisk, don't leave. It needs you. You are part of it now. Asterisk, below that, scratched into the paper with what looked like a knife. Asterisk, the house remembers. Asterisk, I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate. Then the attic door creaked open. This time I didn't go up. I watched. I waited. A long, spindly arm reached down through the attic opening, skin like parchment, fingers that seemed far too long. I stepped back, another arm, then a head. It was the man, or what was left of him. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. He crawled from the attic and stood at the top of the stairs, his head tilted at an unnatural angle, watching me, his mouth twitching like he was trying to form words. Then finally he spoke. His voice was wet. "Rotten, you opened the door. You called us." I didn't remember calling anything, but I had read the journal. I had spoken names out loud. I had tried to understand. And in doing so, maybe I believed. That was enough. I ran to the back door. It was sealed shut. The walls pulsed again, like lungs. I felt the floor breathing beneath my feet. The house was alive, and I was a heartbeat now. There was a knock at the front door. Just once. Then silence. I slowly approached. Through the peephole, nothing, but I heard whispering directly behind the door. I placed my hand on it, hesitating. Then I heard my own voice say, "Let me in." I stepped back. It said it again. My voice, softer, pleading, "Let me in." I ran upstairs, locked myself in the bedroom again. The mirror had been covered with a sheet since that night, but I could still feel it pulsing behind the fabric. The reflection didn't need glass anymore. I heard footsteps approach the door, then stop, then breathing. Slow, close, right outside. A voice whispered, "You can't hide in your own skin." Then silence. All night, I didn't sleep. At dawn, I sat at my desk and picked up the journal again. There was one page left. One final entry written in tiny, cramped letters. Asterisk, the only way out is through. Finish what he started. Write your name. Seal the chapter. Or stay forever. Asterisk, there was a blank space below, waiting for me to sign it. The morning light did nothing to reassure me. It felt like a mockery, a false sense of calm that couldn't penetrate the heaviness in the air. I sat in the dim light, the journal open in front of me, staring at the final entry. Asterisk, finish what he started. Write your name. Seal the chapter. Or stay forever. Asterisk, my hand trembled above the paper. I was so close to understanding, to finding out what was truly happening here. But I knew, deep down, that this was a point of no return. If I signed my name, there would be no going back. The house wouldn't let me leave. But if I didn't, what would happen? Would it keep me here, locked inside its walls forever? Feeding on my fear, my confusion? I had no answers, only more questions. And the more I thought about it, the more it felt like the house was feeding on me already. Every passing second, I felt smaller, weaker, like the walls themselves were pressing in, squeezing the life out of me. The thought of walking away without facing it, without understanding what this was, made my stomach turn. What if it was too late? What if it already had me? I slowly moved my pen toward the journal, but the moment my hand touched the page, I felt the temperature drop, my breath fog in the air, even though the radiator was blasting heat. The floor creaked behind me. Slowly I turned. The door stood wide open. I hadn't heard it open. No footsteps. No sound of the doorknob turning. It was just open. I stood frozen, staring at the empty doorway. The silence around me was thick, unnatural. Then I saw him, the man from the attic. But this time, he wasn't standing at the top of the stairs. He was standing right in front of me. His face was still that pale, gaunt mask of terror. His eyes were empty holes, black and endless. His mouth twitched, moving like it was trying to form words, but nothing came out. I wanted to scream, but my throat felt like it was closing. I couldn't move. He reached forward, his long, bony fingers extended toward me, slow, deliberate, and that's when I felt it. The cold. It wasn't just the air. It was something deeper, something that settled in my chest, in my bones. The very air around me felt frozen, each breath sharp and painful as it filled my lungs. "Don't," I whispered, unable to stop myself, but his hand didn't stop. It came closer, just inches from my face. I stepped back, but my feet wouldn't move. It was as if the floor had glued me to the spot, holding me in place. His fingers brushed my cheek, and I felt the chill penetrate my skin. A cold so deep it was like ice piercing my soul. The house groaned around me, a low, painful sound that seemed to rise from the very walls, the floor, the ceiling, like something ancient was waking up. He didn't speak, but I could hear him, inside my head. Asterisk, you're part of it now. You can't leave. You never could. Asterisk, the room seemed to shrink around me, closing in, the walls pushed in so tight that I could barely breathe. My chest felt like it was being crushed under the weight of something far greater than this house. I heard whispers, countless whispers, all around me. Voices, some familiar, some foreign. Finish it, they said in unison. I looked back at the journal. The page was still blank, still waiting. The door slammed shut behind me. The house was locking me in. There was no escape. I moved back to the desk, my hands shaking. The pen felt heavy in my grasp, like it didn't belong to me. It didn't feel real. I didn't want to sign it, but I couldn't stop myself. I wrote my name. The moment I finished, the house screamed. It was a sound like nothing I've ever heard. It wasn't a human scream. It was a wail, a moan of pure anguish and rage. The walls shook. The floor buckled beneath my feet. I could feel in the air, vibrating, as if the very structure of the house was coming apart at the seams. The door rattled violently, and I heard the sound of something heavy dragging itself across the floor. The air was thick with dust, but I could barely see through it. My vision blurred, and I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears, loud and fast. I turned to look at the man in the hallway, but he was gone. The house was quiet again, deadly quiet. I moved toward the door, but the hallway stretched in front of me, impossibly long. The air felt thick, suffocating. Every step I took, the darkness seemed to reach out, swallowing more and more the light. The door was still wide open, but the house wouldn't let me leave. I tried to move, tried to get to the front door, but the ground shook beneath my feet. The walls closed in, the hallway bending like it was alive. And then the whispers started again. This time it was louder. Asterisk, stay. Stay forever. Asterisk. I ran. I don't know where I'm going, but I can hear them. They're behind me. The house is alive. And it's hungry. The panic was unbearable. I ran, heart pounding in my chest, my breaths coming in sharp, shallow gasps. The floor creaked beneath me, as though the house itself was trying to hold me back. My legs felt weak, like they were no longer my own. I couldn't see clearly, the world around me shifting and warping, the walls twisting into unfamiliar shapes as though the house itself was changing, adapting, trying to trap me. I didn't know where I was anymore. The hallway had seemed endless, stretching out before me, far beyond what it should have. The door, my asterisk door, was still open, but now it felt like I was never going to reach it. Each step I took seemed to move me further away from it, as though the house had shifted and was pulling me back into the heart of its darkness. The whispers were louder now. They weren't just in my head anymore. They surrounded me, filled the space like a dense fog. I couldn't make out the words, just the tone, the deep, hollow sound of voices that came from somewhere far below the surface of the house. I turned a corner, hoping for an escape, but instead found myself in a small, dimly lit room. It had a single window, one that looked out over the backyard, but the view was obscured by a thick layer of grime. I could barely make out the trees swaying the wind, but that didn't matter. The room had the same oppressive feeling as the rest of the house, as if something dark and ancient was pressing in from all sides. I backed away from the window, my eyes darting to the far corner of the room. That's when I saw it. A figure stood there, just beyond the edge of the dim light. It wasn't quite solid. It flickered, like a shadow that had taken shape, but only halfway. Its form was vague, shifting, but there was something undeniably human about it. It was the woman. I had seen her before, standing in the attic. Her face was pale, almost translucent, with eyes that were wide, hollow, and full of dread. Her hair was long, tangled, and black, hanging around her face in heavy strands. She was staring directly at me, as if waiting for me to acknowledge her. My body refused to move. I couldn't tear my eyes away from her. And then she stepped forward, not in a smooth motion, but in jerky, disjointed movements, like she was struggling to break free from something holding her back. Each step was slow, deliberate, and each one filled me with a deeper sense of dread. "Help me," she whispered, her voice thin and distorted, like it was coming from far away. I took a step back, instinctively wanting to escape, but there was nowhere to go. The door behind me had vanished. The window was just an illusion. I was trapped. The woman's figure shifted, flickered again, but this time, when it came into focus, her face was no longer the same. It was twisted, deformed, something not entirely human. Her mouth stretched wide, splitting in unnatural ways, exposing teeth that were sharp and jagged, like they were made to tear through flesh. "You have to finish it," she said, her voice now like nails on a chalkboard, scraping the air. Asterisk, "You have to finish what he started." Asterisk. I stumbled backward, my heart racing. My hands were slick with sweat, my breath coming in gasps, as if I were suffocating. The woman's mouth opened wider, her head jerking unnaturally to the side. Her neck made a horrible cracking sound, like something was breaking inside of her. The air in the room grew colder, the temperature dropping to an unbearable chill. I couldn't look away. I was paralyzed. "It's too late," she said, her voice growing louder, echoing in my mind. Asterisk, "You can't leave. You never could." Asterisk. The floor beneath me trembled, and the walls groaned like they were straining under the weight of something ancient. The shadows in the room seemed to grow thicker, pressing in from all sides. And then I heard it, a sound, a slow, deliberate tapping like fingernails against wood. It came from the farthest corner of the room, from behind the figure. It grew louder, the rhythm faster, as if something was closing in on me. I spun around, and that's when I saw it. A shape, a dark, shifting shape, moving toward me in the corner of my eye. I didn't wait. I turned and ran. I ran, not knowing where I was going, just desperate to get away. The floorboards creaked beneath me. The walls seemed to close in tighter with every step. The house wasn't just a building anymore. It was alive. It was hunting me. The door to the living room was in front of me, but as I reached for the handle, it slammed shut with a deafening bang. I jerked back, heart racing. I looked behind me. The woman was gone, but the room felt heavier, darker, as though the shadows had a presence all their own. The temperature had dropped even further, and the cold was biting, almost painful. The whispers grew louder, and I could hear them now, distinct words floating through the air. Asterisk, "You can't escape. It knows you now." Asterisk. The ground shook beneath me again, more violently this time. I felt the walls tremble, as if the entire house was about to collapse. I pressed my hands against my ears, trying to block out the sounds, but they wouldn't stop. The voices, the banging, the creaking, it was all too much. I stumbled backward, my vision blurring. The floor beneath me gave way, and I found myself tumbling down a flight of stairs. My body hit the ground hard. The air knocked from my lungs. I tried to stand, but I couldn't. My legs were shaking, my head spinning. And then the whisper stopped. It was quiet, too quiet. I looked around, struggling to focus. I was at the bottom of the stairs, in a small, dark room I hadn't seen before. There was a door at the far end, barely visible in the darkness. But I could hear it. A voice, a soft, raspy whisper that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Asterisk, it's waiting. Asterisk, and I knew, deep down, that whatever haunted this place, it was waiting for me, to finish what had been started. I couldn't breathe. I was frozen, my body numb, as the whisper echoed in my ears. The voice seemed to swirl around me, coming from every direction. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I could barely stand, the weight of everything pressing down on me like an iron vice. The air was thick, suffocating. The house felt like it was alive, watching me, its heartbeat matching the thumping in my chest. I slowly turned my head, my eyes scanning the room, but there was nothing there, nothing except darkness. I couldn't stay. I knew that now. I had to get out of here. But the door at the far end of the room, the one I had seen only moments ago, was gone. It wasn't even a door anymore, just a solid, featureless wall. The room was shrinking. The shadows were closing in. The walls were pressing in on me like the jaws of a great beast, trapping me in its grip. And then I saw it, a shape darker than the shadows themselves, moving slowly across the room. It wasn't human. I could feel it, its presence, its wrongness. It was like a thing that shouldn't exist, an unnatural, twisted form that defied the laws of nature. Its edges flickered like a broken television screen, distorting and warping as it moved. I couldn't make out any details, just darkness and the sense of something waiting. It was closer now. I could hear its breathing, slow, deliberate, as though it was savoring every second of my fear. My heart hammered in my chest, threatening to burst. I forced myself to move. My legs shook, but I took a step forward, then another. I had to find an escape. I had to, but then the temperature dropped again, colder this time, as if the very air was freezing. A sharp, biting cold that numbed my skin and stung my bones. I could see my breath now, cloudy in the air before me, and I knew, that whatever it was right behind me. I ran. I ran without thinking, without looking back. My feet pounded against the floor, the sound echoing in the narrow space. I could hear it, feel it, following me, the darkness pressing from all sides. But I didn't dare slow down. I couldn't. I reached the stairs, the same stairs I had fallen down earlier, and I didn't hesitate. I scrambled to my feet and began to climb, my fingers scraping against the railing for support. I could hear it, the thing behind me, its breath growing louder with every step I took. I was almost at the top when I heard something that made my blood run cold. A voice, not the whisper from before, but something deeper, louder. Asterisk, you can't escape. Asterisk, I stumbled. My foot missed a step, and I felt myself falling, tumbling backward. I hit the ground hard, the air rushing out of my lungs. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I had to keep moving. I forced myself up again, my legs weak, my vision spinning. The house was alive, alive with malice, with hunger. I could hear it, the sound of something following me, its footsteps in sync with mine. It was coming closer, closer, closer. I reached the front door. It was there, finally, a gleam of light beyond the threshold. I grabbed the handle, but it wouldn't turn. It was locked. Panic surged through me. I yanked at the door with everything I had, but it wouldn't budge. It was as though the house itself was keeping me inside. Then I heard it, the tapping. It was slow at first, distant, but it grew louder, more insistent. I turned, frantic, my breath ragged in my chest. The walls seemed to press in, bending and shifting. The hallway stretched farther than it should have, the shadows thickening. And there, at the end of the hall, I saw it, the woman. She was standing there, her twisted face grinning at me. Her mouth was wide, impossibly wide, her eyes hollow and dead. The smile on her face wasn't one of comfort. It wasn't one of welcome. It was something far worse. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I pulled at the door again, my hands slick with sweat. It was the only way out, the only way to escape. But the door remained immovable, as if the house itself had taken control. And then I heard it again. The tapping, closer now, more deliberate. But this time, it wasn't from the shadows. It was behind me. I turned slowly, afraid of what I might see. And there, asterisk, it was a figure darker than the shadows, but now it had shape. I could see its outline, a man or something like a man, but wrong, so wrong. His eyes were wide, empty, his body twisted in unnatural ways, like he had been broken and remade into something else. He reached out for me, his hand stretched toward me, and I felt my body freeze. I couldn't move. My legs wouldn't work. My breath caught in my throat. The figure spoke, its voice low and guttural, as though it was coming from the depths of the earth. Asterisk, you should have left when you had the chance. Asterisk, I opened my mouth to scream, but the words never came. The world around me twisted and warped. the walls closing in, the air growing thick and suffocating. The last thing I saw before everything went black was a woman's face, her twisted grin, and the figure's outstretched hand. The next time someone enters this house, will they hear the whispers? Will they see the figure in the dark? Or will they be the ones to finish what was started all those years ago? And so, the house waits.